1943, somewhere in occupied Poland, a British airman sits in a cramped cell at a German prisoner of war camp. Iron bars block the only window. Guards patrol every hour. The war feels 1,000 miles away, but this airman has something the Germans have not found. Something they never thought to look for. His bootlaces. To any guard who glanced at them, they looked ordinary. Brown. Frayed at the ends, threaded through the eyelets of standard-issue flying boots. But hidden inside the textile sheath was a surgical wire originally designed to cut through human bone. And tonight, that wire would cut through something else entirely. The iron bars of his cell window. This was not luck. This was not coincidence. This was British Military Intelligence Section 9, MI9. And the man responsible for hiding a bone saw inside a shoelace was a former film publicist who had once challenged Harry Houdini to an escape contest. Guards believed walls, wire, and routine inspections were enough. They had not seen what MI9 had learned to hide. The problem facing British intelligence in 1939 was unlike anything military planners had confronted before. The Royal Air Force was sending thousands of aircrew over occupied Europe every night. Bomber command casualties were horrific. According to Imperial War Museum records, more than 40% of operational aircrew were killed over the course of the war. Hundreds of trained pilots, navigators, wireless operators and gunners were parachuting into enemy territory every month. Many died on impact. Many more were captured within hours of landing. The scale was staggering. Between 1939 and 1945, over 170,000 Allied servicemen became prisoners of war in German camps. Stalags for enlisted men, Oflags for officers, specialist camps for airmen. The Third Reich operated hundreds of facilities across occupied Europe, from Norway to North Africa, from France to the depths of Poland. These men represented years of training and enormous investment. A fully qualified bomber pilot cost roughly £10,000 to train. More importantly, these were experienced combat veterans. Every man who made it home could fly again. Every man captured was a total loss. The Geneva Convention guaranteed prisoners of war humane treatment. Red Cross parcels provided food and basic necessities, but there was no international law requiring captors to make escape easy. German camps were designed to hold men for the duration. Barbed wire fences, guard towers with searchlights, attack dogs, roll calls twice daily, solitary confinement for anyone caught attempting escape. Traditional escape methods required tools that prisoners simply could not obtain. Hacksaw blades were large, metallic, and immediately recognizable during searches. Files were similarly conspicuous. Wire cutters were impossible to conceal. The Germans knew exactly what to look for, and they found it. British prisoners needed cutting tools that did not look like cutting tools. They needed equipment that could survive the most thorough search imaginable. They needed objects so mundane, so ordinary, so utterly boring that no guard would give them a second glance. They needed bootlaces. MI9 was established on the 23rd of December, 1939, with a mission that seemed almost absurd: help captured soldiers escape and get them home. While other intelligence sections gathered information, MI9 existed solely to empty German prison camps. Brigadier Norman Crockett commanded the organisation from room 424 at the Metropole Hotel on Northumberland Avenue in London. A decorated Royal Scots officer and veteran of the First World War, Crockett understood that escape was not merely desirable. It was a strategic imperative. Every successful escape tied up German resources. Guards who might otherwise serve on the front lines had to patrol prison camps. Intelligence officers had to investigate breaches. The Reich had to divert manpower and attention away from the war effort. But Crockett needed someone who could think differently. Someone who understood that the most effective prison break started not with brute force, but with deception. He found that person in Christopher Clayton Hutton. Hutton was 46 years old when he joined MI9 in 1940. His background was eccentric, to say the least. He had worked as a journalist, film publicist, and advertising manager. He had no military engineering experience, but he had one qualification that no other candidate possessed. In 1913, young Hutton had challenged Harry Houdini to escape from a packing case built by workers from his family's timber mill in Birmingham. Houdini accepted. Hutton was convinced his box was escape-proof. He was wrong. Houdini emerged within minutes, having bribed the workmen to use dummy nails that could be pushed out from inside. The lesson stuck with Hutton for 3 decades. Deception trumped strength. Misdirection defeated security. The best escape was one that nobody saw coming. When Hutton recounted this story during his MI9 interview, Crockett recognized the value immediately. He approved Hutton's recruitment with a memorable caveat. This officer is eccentric. He cannot be expected to comply with ordinary service discipline, but he is far too valuable for his services to be lost to this department. Crockett was right on both counts. Hutton's genius was seeing ordinary objects as escape equipment in disguise. Hairbrushes could conceal compasses, board games could hide maps, flying boots could transform into civilian shoes, and bootlaces could contain saws. The Gigli saw, a flexible wire used in surgery, was invented by Italian surgeon Leonardo Gigli in the 1890s. Gigli designed the wire for cutting through bone during difficult operations. The saw consisted of multiple, flexible steel wires twisted together in a helical pattern, creating cutting teeth along the entire surface. Loops at each end allowed surgeons to grip the wire and work it back and forth with a reciprocating motion. The surgical version was roughly 3 mm thick and 33 cm long. It was flexible enough to thread behind bone, yet strong enough to cut through it efficiently. Hutton discovered the Gigli saw through a friend whose father was a surgeon. His insight was immediate and practical. The wire could be purchased ready-made and would fit inside a bootlace without adaptation. The concealment was elegant. Hutton obtained the raw serrated wire from a factory in Birmingham. Workers sheathed each wire in textile covering that looked exactly like ordinary bootlace material. Simple split-ring handles replaced the bulky surgical grips. The finished product was indistinguishable from any other bootlace in any other flying boot in any other prison camp. According to Hutton's own account and MI9 records documented by Foote and Langley, Hutton obtained enough serrated wire to produce around 10,000 saws, 10,000 bootlaces, 10,000 chances to cut through iron bars. The physics of the Gigli saw made it devastatingly effective against prison security. Unlike a hacksaw, which required rigid mounting and considerable force, the wire saw worked through patient reciprocation. Long, steady strokes, moderate pressure. The helical cutting surface did the work, chewing through metal with each pass. According to testing documented in M.R.D. Foote and J.M. Langley's authoritative work MI9 Escape and Evasion, the flexible wire could abrade through the kind of mild iron bars used in many camp windows, but only with long, patient sawing, heat breaks, muffling and luck. It was not an instant miracle. The technique required patience rather than strength, back and forth, allowing heat to dissipate periodically to prevent the wire from weakening. Wrapping cloth around the wire where it contacted the bar muffled the sound. Working only during guards' meal times or shift changes reduced the risk of detection. In ideal conditions, a determined man working in darkness might cut through a bar over several nights, multiple bars over many nights, and then, eventually, the window would open. The saw had limitations. Hardened steel resisted cutting. Aggressive sawing caused the wire to fatigue and snap. The friction generated considerable heat, and the distinctive rasping sound of metal on metal could carry further than prisoners hoped. But against the mild steel and iron bars typical of German camp construction, the Gigli saw was brutally effective. The bootlace saw was just one element of a comprehensive escape system. The 1943 pattern escape boot represented MI9's most sophisticated clothing adaptation. The upper section was black suede with sheepskin lining. The lower section was a black leather Oxford walking shoe. They looked like ordinary flying boots. They were anything but. A concealed knife hid in a pocket in the right boot. The hollow heel contained silk escape maps, a miniature compass, and a metal file. When a downed pilot landed in enemy territory, he could use the knife to cut away the suede leggings, leaving civilian walking shoes that attracted no attention. The removed leggings could be reassembled into a waistcoat for warmth. Some 1943 pattern boots incorporated Gigli saws directly into the bootlaces. The complete package gave a captured airman everything he needed to cut his way out of confinement and walk across occupied Europe. Now, before we see how these devices reached prisoners and what happened when they did, if you are finding this interesting, consider subscribing. It takes a second, costs nothing, and helps the channel grow. Right, back to how MI9 got bone saws into German prison camps. Distribution was as ingenious as the devices themselves. MI9 could not risk compromising Red Cross parcels. Those packages provided vital food and maintained Geneva Convention protections. If Germans discovered escape equipment in Red Cross deliveries, they might block all humanitarian aid. Instead, MI9 created fictional charitable organizations. the licensed Victualers Sports Association, the Prisoners' Leisure Hours Fund, the Ladies' Knitting Circle, the Jigsaw Puzzle Club. These phantom charities sent care packages to prison camps across occupied Europe. Between 1942 and 1945, MI9 dispatched over 6,800 packages. Nearly 25% contained concealed equipment. The games were particularly effective. MI9 partnered with John Waddington Limited, manufacturers of the British Monopoly licence. Special edition boards were hollowed to conceal maps printed on silk, real German currency, miniature compasses, and ghillie saws. A mark on the packaging indicated which games were special. Patent applied for printed on the cover meant the game contained contraband. Dartboards concealed saws and compasses within their cork construction. Hairbrushes from G.B. Kent & Sons featured hollowed backs containing escape equipment, disguised with a coating of artificial dandruff. Gramophone records produced with EMI had maps laminated between the shellac layers. By late 1944, some camps were requesting that the agencies stop sending devices. They had run out of storage space. Documented evidence of the ghillie saw in action is frustratingly scarce. MI9 deliberately destroyed most operational records at war's end. These were better kept secrets than the Manhattan Project, notes Philip Orbanes, who researched the program extensively. Prisoners who received escape equipment were instructed to destroy delivery methods immediately. The secrecy that made the program successful also erased much of its history. 1. Name case survives in detail. Lieutenant David Bowling was held at Stalag Luft 3 in late 1943. According to Philip Orbanes, the Monopoly historian at Parker Brothers, Bowling responded to his commanding officer's request for a solo escape attempt. The mission was urgent. Intelligence indicated that the ERS was attempting to wrest control of prisoner of war camps from the Luftwaffe, with proposals to execute all prisoners. Bowling carried German money, a silk map, a tiny compass, wire cutters, and a ghillie saw. Contemporary accounts link the saws and other tools to hollow games and care packages. Monopoly sets and similar deliveries were a known MI9 route, and Orbanes believes Bowling's equipment came through this channel. He cut his way through the wire perimeter and successfully reached Zurich in Switzerland, delivering the critical intelligence. His escape demonstrated exactly what MI9 had designed the program to achieve: the right tools, properly concealed, enabling a determined man to get home. Estimates of MI9's overall impact vary depending on what is counted. Escapes, evasions, returns to duty. Modern accounts, including Helen Fry's comprehensive study, attribute thousands of successful returns to MI9 operations. Some tallies run into the tens of thousands. At Colditz Castle, the supposedly escape-proof fortress for persistent offenders, MI9 packages enabled 316 escape attempts. 32 soldiers made successful home runs. National Archives documents confirm that parcels to Colditz contained maps, money, pens, paper, photographic materials, printed forgeries of identity documents, dyes, torch batteries, hacksaw blades, and needles. The Germans eventually adapted. Early war, routine package searches missed most escape aids. The concealment was simply too good, but growing suspicion led to more sophisticated countermeasures. Guards began checking for hollow heels and magnetized buttons. Packages were opened and minutely examined. As the war progressed, the Germans improved camp searches, more thorough parcel checks, X-ray machines in some camps. These countermeasures gradually reduced the volume of contraband slipping through. The same technology that revealed broken bones could reveal the bone saws hidden in bootlaces. But by then, the program had been operating for years. Thousands of devices had already reached prisoners. Many had already been used. No documented systematic escape aid program on the scale of MI9 existed among the Axis powers. Academic research confirms this. A doctoral dissertation from Ohio State University states that none of the Axis powers appears to have developed a program anything like MISX or MI9. MI9's efforts were industrial, centralized, and constantly innovating in ways Germany did not match. The Reich did not develop a strategic bomber force requiring long-range crews at high capture risk. German pilots flew tactical missions over relatively short distances. When they were shot down, they usually landed in friendly territory or died. The mathematics of attrition that forced Britain to invest in escape technology simply did not apply to German air operations. German military doctrine also did not emphasize escape-mindedness as a duty. The Abwehr focused on espionage and sabotage, not supporting prisoners of war. There was no German equivalent of Crockett or Hutton thinking creatively about how to get captured men home. When German prisoners escaped from Allied camps, they relied entirely on improvised equipment, magnetized needles floating on cork, maps carved on linoleum plates, fake documents made from potatoes and India ink. They had no external organizational support, no fictional charities sending game boards with hidden saws, no surgical wire disguised as shoelaces. Their ingenuity was individual. British ingenuity was industrial. The Americans recognized British superiority immediately. MISX, founded in October 1942 at Fort Hunt in Virginia, was explicitly modelled on MI9. More importantly, American commanders decided that all United States aircrew in Europe would be supplied with evasion and escape devices by MI9. It made no sense to ship equipment from America to Britain when the British were already producing it. American servicemen over occupied Europe wore British escape boots and laced them with British bootlaces containing British wire saws designed by a former film publicist who had once lost an escape contest to Harry Houdini. The legacy extends to the present day. Modern survival evasion, resistance and escape training known as SERI, traces directly to MI9's wartime innovations. Every British and American pilot, every special forces operator, every serviceman trained to survive behind enemy lines owes something to Hutton's vision. The BCB Commando wire saw, currently NATO approved and issued to British Special Forces including the SAS, is a direct descendant of Hutton's Giggly saw adaptations. The concept of concealing escape tools in everyday objects, pioneered by MI9 in the early 1940s, remains fundamental to military survival training 8 decades later. Christopher Clayton Hutton died in 1965, 5 years after publishing his autobiography Official Secret. The British government had opposed publication for years, considering the methods too sensitive to reveal. Even 2 decades after the war ended, officials worried that future enemies might learn from MI9's techniques. They were probably right to worry. What Hutton created was not simply a collection of gadgets. It was a philosophy, the understanding that the most effective escape begins with deception, that ordinary objects can become extraordinary tools, that a piece of string, properly prepared, can defeat iron bars and armed guards in an entire security apparatus. The Germans built camps designed to hold men for years. They erected fences and towers and searchlights. They deployed dogs and informers and eventually X-ray machines. They thought they understood imprisonment, but for years they never thought to check the bootlaces. According to Hutton's account, around 10,000 giggly saws, 10,000 pieces of surgical wire hidden in textile sheaths, 10,000 bootlaces that could cut through iron. This was MI9. This was British ingenuity under pressure, producing equipment that worked when it mattered most. No comparable program existed among the Axis powers. Careful concealment, subterfuge, and sheer volume meant many items slipped through inspections for years, and by the time countermeasures improved, thousands of men had already walked free. The man in the cell in occupied Poland, working his bootlace back and forth against the window bars, was not relying on luck. He was relying on a surgeon from 1892, a factory in Birmingham, a fictional charity, and an eccentric intelligence officer who understood that the best prison break was one the enemy never saw coming. The Germans saw walls and wire and guards, MI9 saw bootlaces, and that made all the difference.